Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Edward.
And we're with the Coquille Valley Sword Group. And today we're going to be going over the applications for Sassen. This is going to be a long video probably, so, get the popcorn. We're going to start off with showing some of the orthodox variations of the way that the kata is performed, based on things like imbu or specific teaching principles that you're trying to address. And finally, we'll show the kata in its full. So let's get started from there. To begin with, we're going to go and quickly refresh the way of doing the kata with the safety pause. Now, this is the way that we teach pretty much all of our new students. We're just going to go through it real quick without any explanation. You want explanation, go back to the actual application, or the first video. Okay, for these demonstrations, I'll be taking the role of Shidachi, and Ed will be taking the role of Uchidachi. Good. So, it's the way we do the kata most of the time, but it's not the original way that the kata was designed in Musashi's time. So we're going to go ahead and show that version now. So, by and large, the original version is very similar to the Sassen that we use today. Right? We begin our opening process. Take our 3 steps, bum, 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 and here's the difference. A high thrust. Now the thrust arm is in the same position as the Chudan no Kamae for the 2 swords. So you can go back and watch the Chudan video and get a little bit more instruction as to the position. All right, from here, the rest of the kata is exactly the same. I push, I retake the center, we neutralize, and then he begins Kamae Toku. Up to Tate Zen as I drop the gate on. He chicken steps, whoop, I chicken step, and we roll right on out. So, this begs the question, why change the kata, right? If Musashi was such an amazing swordsman, a kensei, right? A sword saint, a genius of the blade, why would a bunch of old guys go in and change it years after people had stopped fighting with the sword altogether? Well, this actually happens a lot in most Koryu. I mean, there are some Koryu that are very strict, almost legalistically preserving their style. This was the exact way that our founder did it, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, and we will do it this exact way, irregardless of anything else. And in a time when they, in their minds, don't have an intention to use the work, that's completely legitimate. They're preserving a cultural heritage item, basically. But in styles like Hyoho, where we have the idea, the belief that we are using the work still. Just because we're not drawing steel down on some dude doesn't mean we're not drawing polymer, right? Or any other sort of social example of the work, because it's all the same. In styles like that, living styles, styles that are growing and evolving, the idea that one person, no matter how skillful, that they could possibly know or have as much information and thus the tools to improve and refine their work to the degree that the hundreds of thousands of people that come after them have collectively together is just not something we subscribe to, right? Musashi was amazing. You know, ask any kid on the internet and he'll tell you just that. But, you know, there are a lot of other good swordsmen in the style, and, you know, it has to grow, it has to get better. But, of course, it has to do that without corrupting the core essence of the style. Because Hyoho is not a collection of fancy secret ninja cuts or pokes or stuff like that. Hyoho is a set of strategic concepts. So as long as you're adhering to those core concepts, you know, you could do anything. We could twirl batons in the method of the Ichi school. So, back to the question at hand, why change Sassen? Why take it from a thrust whose arm position is already well established in our style to a position that is completely sort of foreign and out of it? And that's a good question. The main reasons, let me start off by saying that this is just my speculation as to the reasons. But I think that the reason is to help people study how to support the work with one hand better. Where you can certainly learn to apply thrusts and pressure and contact to your partner from a high guard position, and we do it quite frequently in the Nito Seiho. The Nito Seiho doesn't come until after we've already gone through all the tachi work, the longsword work, and that could take a while. And that's, you know, 12 kata of somebody maybe not having a really solid grasp on using the sword one-handed. So if Eddie's out here and I'm in the high guard position and I want to poke him, you know, I can do it using the same principles of arcing the power through my body like we do with Sassen. But it is much less forgiving. In other words, the room for error is much higher. So we shift into the low Sassen position, and it's a lot easier to study because it's a lot, it's set up more kind of architecturally in a way that is strong, right? When I'm up here, I am a little bit weaker in my position, in my support. And so the low Sassen, even though we're sacrificing maybe 8 inches of range, is a much stronger position. But everybody has their preferences, right? So what we're going to do next is show one of the common imbu or demonstration forms of Sassen. This is very much like the paused safety step kata, and it can be done either with the safety pause or without. It depends on the person who's doing the demonstration, but we'll go ahead and show it. So again, it starts off almost identical, right? I'm in Gedan, he's in Tate Zen, he rolls down into Chudan, I roll up into Chudan also. He pushes into Hasso just like every other day, I drop down into Gedan. And we take our 3 steps and we'll pause. Ichi-san. Now, this is where things get different, right? I'm going to take an exaggerated step and an exaggerated thrust. So as he cuts, I pull and thrust as so. Abba, like that, right? So after the thrust, boom, and this can be done high or low. Again, it depends on who's doing the presentation. Then the kata goes as normal. Push, center, neutralize. Kamae otoku, up, 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 and chicken step. Now, obviously, this makes for good imbu because it's flashy, it's dramatic. You hit the ground real hard, there's a big sound. It catches people's attention, right? It's like, oh, it's a little mercenary, right? It's a little about the money. Yeah, it is. However, it probably didn't start off that way. In Sassen, in the thrust, when you watch people do it, or when beginners do it early in their skill level, there's this sense as though the arms are kind of locked to the hips, and that the thrust is done almost entirely with the hip motion being driven through the arm. But this is not the case. There is a very subtle ba, ba, hip. I'll show it from the side. Hip. I let my hand lag just a bit before I execute the thrust. This is, it's a method of generating power, similar to kind of fajin in Chinese martial arts. It's this snapping, whipping into the target power. I have just the complete belief that it started off as just one instructor trying to emphasize this motion to students that were a little like blocky with their sasen, a little dead. And then somebody was just like, oh man, that's real cool. How about you do that for the imbu because it looks good? Okay, right? So there's that. The last variation that we're going to show is not so much a variation in the work, but a variation in the timing. It's removing that pause. So on the third step, I sasen. On his fourth step, he cuts at me, unless he starts with his feet reversed with the right foot forward, in which case he cuts on the third step. Right? It's clear as mud, but it covers the ground. So let's go ahead and show it again. It starts in the beginning. So my motions are the same, but without a pause. So if he backs up a bit, I go 1, 2, 3. The only thing that is a little gnarly about this, a little difficult for beginners, is, well, there are kind of two things. One, try not to tell the dude where you're going. A lot of people, like, if they're working on the guy, they're like, I'm totally walking in a straight line, I'm definitely not going off this way, boop. And they sort of wander, veer, or lean and favor that leg when they want to go. Your goal is to just walk dead straight at the dude. Ba, ba, right? The second part that's tricky is how that step moves. In other words, it's not ba, ba, like a hop, skip, and a jump. Instead, it resembles a fall, but it's a drive, right? So 1, 2, and my foot's moving forward as though I was just going to take that next step, and then I rocket my hips out of the way. As I drive the foot, bump, into place, so that I'm off the line of attack and work in. This helps to both conceal my intention as to which way I'm going if we were to use this, like, just this is exactly what I'm going to do in a fight, which is not very common. But it also gets me into the habit of moving with intention and being able to sort of dynamically change where I am in relation to the center line of combat. So those are the typical variations that you'll see in mainline schools, right? So we'll move on to the next section. Next, we're going to go over the direct application of the motions in the kata. Now, again, it's worth mentioning that the kata are not a precise blueprint of how you respond in combat. In other words, it's not like, I my video game character has this move, and anytime someone does this, I can press my A button and I can do this move to them. It's more like waza, it's technique, right? And while the kata contains individual techniques, it's not assumed that you're going to just plug and play, like, oh, I'm fighting a dude, he's in Hasso, I'm gonna plan right off the bat to Sassen him, right? It doesn't work that way. They're examples. That being said, they also do contain individual wazas, like, oh, well, here's how you can poke a dude. And those are the applications that we're going to talk about in this section, right? So, start from the beginning, right? Here, we're just chill, right? He begins his aggression at me with his getting all, oh, right, okay, and I'm just going to be calm here, right? He comes up to swack me, and this first motion, boom, is to remove myself from the line of attack. So I've got, a good 6 inches from my center line off of where he hit. Now, people will be like, maybe he can hit you, maybe he can cut you. Yeah, absolutely, maybe he can. But we'll get into that more in the next section. For now, suffice it to say that the reason that I'm taking this step is to get off the line of attack, right? Now, obviously, if I just defend, I'm going to die, right? Eventually, I will not be able to defend, and he's just going to overwhelm me, especially if he's got buddies, right? So he makes that cut, and I want to respond. Boom, right? So I'm taking Sassen to the thrust, to the throat. They're the same, they're homonyms, right? Now, if Eddie's not wearing he's not wearing armor, right? I can thrust anywhere in his body, right? In the kata, we're thrusting into the throat. One, because the way the human eye sees, we hold that for a second, is not uniform. In other words, we don't see in perfect circles, but rather we see in shapes that are similar to the unlidded sections of our eyes, which means in these low areas and in these high areas, your vision is retarded, right? It doesn't work as well. And you can and should practice this yourself. Take your hands and come in till you see. Take your hands and come in till you see, right? And start to really study, right, where the edge of your peripheral vision is, so that you understand where your vision is naturally weak. Because if you can understand where your vision is weak, you can understand where other people's vision is weak. And that's, I think, one of the reasons for the change in Sassen from the high poke to the low poke is we're coming here attacking from that, not only a low space as compared to his center of focus, which is my face that he wants to bash in, but we're also coming in that depressed area where the vision is just not as acute, if there at all, right? Now, with this, we can apply one of the concepts of Hyoho, which is to thrust in the face. Now, this is it's exactly what it sounds, right? I'm thrusting at his face. If I hit him and he dies, that's excellent, right? But we kind of assume that he's not going to drop on the first hit. So my goal in thrusting at his face is, to quote Musashi, to make him rideable. In other words, the moment he swings at me, right, whoop, I get that to where he's on his heels. I drive him. I force him to respond to my action. And this is really important, strategically speaking, because if he's acting on me and I'm responding to him, I am always going to be kind of behind in timing, right? But if he's working on me and he has to start responding to me, now he is behind in timing. And usually their ability to hit you greatly diminishes, because when given the choice of, I'm going to swap this thing out of the way so it doesn't kill me, or I'm going to poke you, most people are going to be like, oh, and try and protect themselves, which just opens them up for the continuance of the aggressor's attack. because they're acting rather than reacting. And action is always faster than reaction because you don't need that additional wind-up time of perceiving and assessing the situation because you already did that before you acted. So you're basically twice as fast. So now let's say that he is wearing armor, right? While Japanese armor is undeniably less effective than, say, European armor, full harness is what I'm talking here. Same thing with Japanese, it's full armor. It's still quite effective. Don't believe anything you've heard about their armor being just bamboo and silk. It's horse pucky, right? There's silk involved, but it's a lot of steel. A lot of steel and lacquered leather and armor plates and stuff like that. So there's no way that I'm just gonna like He-Man through his sode, through his sleeve guard or poke through, 14 millimeter thick breastplate that's been heat treated. It's probably not gonna happen. But just like in any armor, for it to allow him to move, there have to be openings. There have to be places that allow for articulation. And around the neck is one of them, right? Because the neck is kind of an important place. We don't want to just lock our head, so we have to turn our shoulders, right? It's important to be able to sort of quickly scan the battlefield without changing our relationship to an opponent, especially when we're fighting on campaign, which is where we would be wearing armor. So there tends to be a lot of articulation around the neck. So what's there to guard, right? We've got little frills from the helmet. Sometimes we have little raised parts on our sode, our sleeve, right? And often we'll have a mempo. Mempo is kind of a half-face mask with a series of lamellars, armored plates that have been bound together with silk. They just kind of lay loosely there. They're not bound in place, they just sort of dangle. Now, with this thrust, what we're doing, let's turn you at a 45, is I can ride his do, bump, boop, right under his mempo, slipping between it or pushing it to the side, bam, as I come in to the side of his throat. Maybe this is all happening really quickly and I'm thinking, oh man, I am just not going to be able to get in there. Maybe he's got really, really aggressively guarded sode, right? I'm just going to poke him in his eyes, right? I'm going to poke him in his face, right above his mempo, bam! And just let that nice conical helmet catch that for me as I drop him backwards. Because again, it's not enough that I drop the dude. I've got to be able to control his corpse, basically. Because he still has 3 foot of steel lightsaber that, even if it falls on me, will grievously injure me, if not just flat out kill me. And even if I don't die right now, I'm left with the medical tradition of the 13th through 15th century, which that's not real great for me. And that's assuming that I make it through the rest of the battle injured with all his buds and dudes trying to get honor and glory for their daimyo or themselves. So name of the game is don't be freaking hit, and controlling their corpse is part of that. So let's assume that what happens in the kata happens. In other words, he cuts, he sees this thrust, and he starts evading. He jumps back. Bam, bam! That follow-up thrust, that drive to force him to respond to me is important, because if all I do is come off here and he jumps back, whoop, and I don't do anything, I haven't gained anything. In fact, I've lost a very powerful tactical element, which is that surprise. Because in the beginning, I'm not fighting him in a guard that lets him know right away that I'm a badass, right? And so he's thinking, well, this guy is scared, maybe he doesn't know how to fight, whatever. At the very least, I'm not keeping him at bay, so he knows that he can come closer to me than before and be able to hit me with a lot of power, and that he likely only has to dodge a thrust, right? Because not many people cut from this position, and when they do, it's very time-consuming cut, like 1.5 beats. in most styles. Now, Hyoho, of course, is not that way, where we make very, very short cuts from this position, but that's, again, it's not, it's atypical of Japanese fencing. So, when he cuts, right, and he responds to that thrust, I need to push him right away. In the real fight, not only am I gaining initiative and control and using a whole stabbing in the face, right, holding down the pillow, really suppressing his motions, but I have the option then to move into other work right away, whether I'm cutting into the less guarded sections of his forearms, around his elbow, where all he has is relatively thin mail. Japanese chainmail is not like Western chainmail at all. It holds plates together, but it's not very protective. A solid whack will easily defeat it. Just ask the Mongols. So those two thrusts, bop, bop, and the stepping off the line in the beginning are the three sort of technical pieces of work, the three waza, if you will, in Sassen. So what we're going to do next is go through all of the stuff that other schools would call the ura, the interior, the hidden, the part that you don't see readily. Now, in other schools, the ura is reserved for kind of high levels of study, right? It's like, it's assumed that, oh, well, you're just a peon, you're going to do this kata exactly how we say it, and you're going to do it for years, and maybe one day Sensei will get drunk and he'll just be, right, show you it. But that is it for now. We're going to move on to the next section. So now let's go over the deeper application of Sassen. Now, as we mentioned before, Sassen is the sort of keystone kata of Hyoho. It contains everything that is fundamentally important, and pretty much everything beyond that is either a further example, an opportunity to show a specific waza or technique, or just sort of supplementary information that can be useful as an additional example. So we're going to spend a lot of time on this application. So the fundamental lesson of Sassen is to seize the initiative, to strike the opponent before they begin to execute their attack. Basically, the moment he gets it, if he's in the high guard, the moment he starts to think like, I'm going to cut this dude, bam, right? You hit him, right? And you take that initiative from him right off the bat. Now, in the kata, we are working in the third initiative, right? So he cuts, and I'm working behind him, right? So we're not moving in equal timing, and I'm not moving first and he's responding to me. This is an affect for safety. In application, this is done in the timing of Ken no Sen, first initiative, to strike the opponent first. So what happens is we start walking, and I tag him. The moment I see that flicker in his mind, like, I'm going to cut this dude, bam, I hit him, right? And I force him out of his rhythm right away. I break it down, and I take control of the situation. Bop, 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 all the way down. Super, super important, right? Now, in addition to that one core concept, there are a lot of other concepts that happen in Sassen. So we're going to start at the beginning of the kata and work our way through so that you can see each individual part. In the beginning, we're both real chill, and he comes from Tate Zen into Chudan, Bam. So once he's in Chudan, boo, 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 we are in that middle point. You could say that the equation of our combat is balanced, right? We are neither overly spirited or underly spirited. We are at a nice, even keel. But then things start to change, and they change because he changes them, because he's Uchigachi, right? And so he goes from this position into a highly aggressive stance. To counter that, I'm going to balance out the force equation, if you will, of the fight. So he becomes more spirited, I become less spirited, right? More quieted. Now, this goes to this idea of soft to hard and hard to soft, go and ju, right? Basically, in its simplest to understand terms, if your opponent is hard, you respond with softness. If your opponent is soft, you respond with firmness. The easiest way to see this is in a bind, right? So if we come and we're sort of pressing our swords together. Now, typically, Japanese work, aside from a couple oddball examples, you don't drive your edge into their edge. And this has to do with how the Japanese swords are heat treated. The basic point that is important to understand is that if you drive your edge into their edge, not only are you losing the opportunity to work on the dude immediately, right? But you have to wait kind of a half beat to respond to their own counter force and then roll in. But also, you are creating, without a doubt, grievous damage to your edge, right? Because you're applying force, they're applying force, right? And this is a you'll break a lot of bokken in class, and shinken live blades are really kind of even worse, because once you create that divot in the edge, you've created a mechanical weak point. So anytime I strike with this 3-foot long lever, the force travels down and it's looking for that place to distribute. It hits that nick and it wells up there, and it will just snap your sword just every time. Don't hit with your edge. So I got really sidetracked. The way we're encountering each other in the bind here, is the shinogi, the flat of our swords are pressing against each other, right? Because we're not trying to fight each other's swords. We're not force into force. We're force into force this way, right? We're trying to cut the other dude down, but have encountered this line of force. Now, if he presses hard, he's stronger than me, right? If I try and just win with strength, he's going to overtake me, both because he's slightly taller and because he's heavier and stronger, right? It's going to be bad for me. So if he pushes firm into me, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to respond with softness. I let it go, right? And there are lots of ways of responding with softness, but this is just an example. I let the work, right? If he pushes, pass, right? Bam, bam, as I move in, right? Now, it could be the case that we come to that bind and he's kind of soft, right? So while we have enough contact to maintain the bind, neither of us is applying pressure into it. Not excessive pressure. We're kind of waiting to see what the other person does. If your opponent is soft, you push into them hard, right? You use that strength, take off their ear, Van Gogh them a little bit. And you drive into their body. You force the cut and take it through. But this is not just for bind work. This is for all of the fight. This is for when they swing their sword, because a person can swing their sword hard and they can swing their sword soft. However, outside of the bind, it's very difficult for beginners to get this sense of when a person's hard and when they're soft. So practice it with the bind. You can even do this sort of open-handed pressing against. If he's pushing hard, right, of course, I'm going to be soft. Well, if he's soft, right, I'm going to study how I can be hard and drive in and apply the force in an efficient manner, right? So that's what's happening here, right? He goes hard, I go soft. Now, as we step, bum, 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 we come to the next section, which is this idea of not just duality and balance in the fight, but of an internal duality. In other words, when on the outside I am full of bluster, my guard is highly spirited, I'm driving in here, even with my spirit high, I want to keep myself not passive, but quiet on the inside, right? In contrast, when I come down here, right, I'm quiet on the outside, right? But on the inside, I'm very active. I'm driving, I'm moving, I'm preparing myself to really just burst forth and get the work done. So we make our steps, yeah, 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 and he cuts. And in this moment, right, for real, obviously, bam, that's when I'm going to start to blow into him, because again, he is shifting the kind of paradigm of our relationship. He's going from active to what will be a passive position, a sort of chill, right? And to balance this equation, I go into that bam, active position. So, and it's also changing because up till now, he's led the way, right? But the moment that I decide that all this is changing, he's starting to think, okay, now I'm going to start to change it. And the moment he starts to think that, before he even begins, is when I work, boom, and I force the change. So either we're doing it dead as kata, and he works first, and he makes the change, and I resolve the situation, balance the equation this way, or we're doing the waza as if it was real, and I go first, and I force the change. Because he goes from, I'm being active to, I'm being receptive and passive, right? So it balances out, right? Why would we want to do that, right? What is the benefit of balancing this work? When your work is balanced, it is not, it doesn't directly conflict. In other words, let's say that we come to the bind, right? Now, if we are both trying to be hard, right? The person who's most hard wins, right? The opposite is true too. If we're both being soft, the person who's most soft wins. But, and this is obviously a problem for us, because again, we're working under the assumption that our opponent is going to be better than us, right? If they're worse than us, we can bully them, right? We can do anything special. There's no skill in that necessarily. But working under the idea that our opponent is going to be better than us, whether individually or situationally, now I have to fight more intelligently, more efficiently, right? Good value. And so I want to avoid direct contests like that, and instead fight in a way that doesn't conflict with him. So if he's pressing hard, right, I work soft. And he doesn't have an innate, the sort of built into the work that he's currently doing response to that. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have some secret ninja trick or something that he's learned, to be clear, it doesn't mean that he can't respond to it. In other words, if we're pushing and he pushes hard and I come off of it, he can still work, right? But it is not as though that work to defeat me is already in the work that he's doing. In other words, if we're both going strong versus strong, yes, the person who's strongest wins. But you can also be the person with the strongest technical work in addition to body strength, can win. And so, by virtue of my position in the work that I'm doing, if nothing changes, I can still win against him if he's forcing the issue strength versus strength, because I have that built into the work. But if he goes soft, even though I'm driving in like that, what I had built into my work to defend me against that other person with an equivocal defense doesn't work, it doesn't function. And so he's able to have, he creates for himself opportunity to defeat me. And that's why this balancing becomes really important. Unless you're, the biggest, strongest, most technically proficient guy who's never going to age and never going to get sick and never going to be injured and never going to have extenuating circumstances, small children, arms full of groceries or whatever, right? If you're that dude, be strong, right? Whoop him, right? Because our goal is fundamentally to win, and to win by the most efficient means possible. And if you're the big guy, be the big guy, right? But it's important to understand that you'll never be the biggest. And if you are, you're going to have a bad day. And I guarantee you, if you're even, a martial arts dude and some guy, I'm going to pull a machete on you in the middle of a parking lot, you're going to have a bad day, right? You're just not going to be psychologically prepared, emotionally prepared for that kind of sudden and radical violence. So don't think you're Superman. You're not, right? Train for the worst situation, and at least you had a shot, right? So, moving right along. Boom! In this thrust. What most people don't know is that Hyoho is a one-handed sword style, right? Even though all but this one kata are done with two hands, the only time we're really using two hands is when we're trying defense with strength. What does that mean? It means when we are trying to fence in a way that subjugates a person, right? In a way that controls their position, in a way that crushes or suppresses their work. The vast majority of the time, we're working one-handed. They swing at us, bump, and we take them, right? Or we take them, right? And it doesn't mean we have to be far away, right? We can take them just as easily from anywhere. And it's this light swinging of the sword that gets the work done. But here's the thing. To be able to do that, you have to have really good freaking teinochi, right? If you're the kind of guy that lets your hands slack a little bit, using one sword is going to be real dangerous for you because it will pop right out of your hand. This is especially true when you start working with opponents who can test your work, right? If you swing and all of a sudden you're getting suppressed, and we have a lot of suppressions in Hyoho, and all of a sudden, boop, you have no sword, you're going, boop, right? Because usually they'll tag you anyway just to give you a good tut chiding, right? So with this one-hand position, we're beginning to study the cardinal concepts of how to maintain this position in kind of the hardest situation that you're going to be in, which is to say a thrust. Mechanically speaking, the thrust is going to be the most difficult way of aligning your teinochi to be able to absorb the force. In contrast, if he's cutting at me and I'm just taking sort of free cuts at him, as long as I am not out here, like trying to cut in line with my shoulders or worse, further out, it's not so bad, right? But more on that in the cutting katas. So after we have come in and we've studied this thrust, we study this idea that after every attack ends with a thrust. Now, in the Sassen kata, we make this very gross, right? Very easy to see, because we have a poke and then immediately another follow-up poke with the body. Because again, this thrust is going to be the hardest place to end your attack with a poke because it already ended with an attack, right? But the way this works in cutting is if Eddie just drops his sword and stands there for a second, right? I'm cutting, whoop, right? But I'm also cutting, right? So even though when I throw the cut, it doesn't look like a thrust, it's there, right? All of the work ends with a cut, or ends with a thrust. It's in that drive to control their body and their position. And when you understand this, you can be quite troublesome to your opponents. You're basically always attacking on this weird half beat. And with the changing rhythm, it's very hard for them to adapt to you, especially if you understand how to ride a person, how to use your seme to really just roll them around the battlefield, right? So we've thrusted, bop, bop, and then we come back to the center line. And again, we equalize the position. This is how we know that it's all chill. It's all done here. And I come down just as easy as pie. Of course, I'm still driving because I'm still in the fight. I am in the fight until I take that step back. And so this chicken step, this, just, right, test them, see what's up, right? Get some information, but be prepared to work, right? A lot of times, when you start introducing students to the Fukuro Shinai and doing the kata work with Fukuro Shinai, you'll do this chicken step, and they'll kind of go, and they just lock up, right? They have trained their body to make this motion and lock into place and hold dead still, and they'll just, ha! And you'll just, boom, and you'll tag them, and they're just like, oh. So don't just like, right? You have to have that sense. It's just like, you can work, right? And again, my position is passive. So what am I inside? Active, right? I am already doing okinagashi cuts on this guy. I'm already driving in off the line to take his wrist, driving in to displace his sword into his collarbone and subclavian artery. I have got this guy pinned with my mind, right? Because again, I'm in that chill passive position. Now, if I was up here in a high guard, that's not what's going on at all. I look like it, right? I got this position like, oh my gosh, he's coming for me. But in my mind, in my heart, I'm open, right? I haven't made a choice. I haven't made a decision. I might have a notion, like my notion is to come in here and whack this dude. But that notion will be devoid of specificity, right? I'm not going to be thinking, oh, I'm going to come in here, I'm just going to pop him, right? I have the idea that I want to come in and attack him, pop, 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 pop. And then whatever he starts to reveal to me, that's where my work, bam, springs into existence spontaneously. That's Book of the Void, right? That is Mushin Muken. And we talked about that in some of the earlier videos. 10,000 days of training, right, for mastery. So that's how that level of work begins and moves. So you can really start to see how from the very beginning we are studying how to gain the initiative, how to hit first, and how to control an opponent as we hit them. We're studying how to balance the sort of inyo, the equation of the universe, not only between uchidachi and shidachi, but in ourselves as well. And this dualistic balance goes to what we talked about in the last video about Kanon and Fudomyo and Musashi's internalization of those divine primal forces and how he views the world, right? So those are the main points of Sassen. That is not to say that that is all of them. Sassen is kind of like the endless well. The more you plummet, the more you'll learn about it, right? And you know, I said it in the last Sassen video, I'll say it in this one too. If you only study one kata, right? Study Sassen, because that is everything you need is right there. So that is the examples of the ura, the interior of the Sassen kata. Next, we'll show some additional work. So what we're going to do now is show some applications of both the concepts and the specific technical waza from the Sassen kata. Now, it is common that when you're training in Koryu, you'll do a kata for a long time, right? And then you'll kind of be, you're expected to start to figure out what the kata is for, why it exists, and the message that you're supposed to get as it relates to the overarching method of your school. And you know, of course, your sensei will talk to you a bit, and you know, like this or like that, or give you your concepts, right? Depending, I mean, some sensei, like me, we're just blabbermouths, and we'll talk your ear off all day, which is not necessarily a good thing. There is a lot to be said for the kind of reflective mind that you develop from sort of scouring these kata and really thinking about them yourselves. But I work with the way I work, and that's the way it is. That was a big tangent. I don't know where I was. So what we're going to do is show some applications. We're going to start off showing some applications directly with the sword, because that's kind of the easiest to understand. I think we'll actually switch the Fukuro Shinai. That works for you? That works for me. Okay, do you want the big fatty or the skinny winny? Okay, big fatty it is. Yeah, you must have put the hurt on. That's so. Among all the concepts of Sassen, there are two more that I forgot to mention. One is to attack in the shortest reasonable distance to be effective. In other words, and this is a big point of confusion in Hyoho, because there's this idea that Musashi himself says that, you know, when you're using the long sword, you should use it broadly and widely as if it was a heavy sword, and that you should avoid chopping or using it like a short sword. And people have come to construe this to mean that when you cut, you should make these big sort of stylized Iaido style cuts that expose your brachial artery and really put your body at risk and telegraph your work really big. And this is, this just does not fit with the rest of Hyoho's strategy. So obviously we do not do that here. What it means is that to chop with the short sword and to make chopping motions in general is to bring your tip down and short, to use these kind of tight in, close to the body, chopping cuts. They're slow, they're ineffective, but don't do them, right? So how does that mesh with the idea of cutting at the shortest distance? If he's got his arm out, right, my sword's here, shortest distance is there to there, right? Just, but that's a chop, right? It's not what we want to do. We want to throw the cut in the same kind of way, but with all of the other principles applied too. I mean, you can't just pick and choose and go, oh, well, no choppy cuts, right? Only big cuts. It's like, well, how do you get a big cut, right? By following everything else, just like we talked about. So, right, bam, and I'm through. So I make that same sort of short, direct line, but my force is not coming down onto him. It's going out and through him. Just like to move him, just like the thrust at the end of all of the cuts, all of it, right? So, you know, if you're working on your own, you don't have access to a study group or you know, an actual Hyoho group, you really have to be careful, right? Read a lot, and realize that by and large, it's not this way or this way. Oh, we got to do what Masashi said here, or we have to do what Masashi said here. They're not separated. They're the same thing. And so the true, okay, real hoity-toity there, way of doing the work is one that is in harmony with all of the principles that have been laid out. Now there are specific specific technical concepts that are very specialized. So they kind of sit by themselves, but you still apply the other work to them. You just don't necessarily apply their work to all the others. And we'll try and go over those as they appear specifically, but they are in fact exclusively in the written work, in the Goren no Sho and the Hyoho Sanjuku Kaja to a lesser extent. So you won't see them in the kata. Anyway, moving forward. The other concept that we did not talk about in the previous section that's important to Sassen is the idea of crossing a river, right? Crossing a river is pretty simple, right? It is this idea that hesitation is death, right? If I'm a boatman and I'm like, oh, well, here's this tumultuous river or whatever, and I'm gonna paddle my boat out here, and I get halfway and I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I gotta make it go away. Oh God, I'm being swept away, right? When it's time to act, you act. When it's not time to act, you don't even start. You don't do something that you're not going to complete, right? Or that you're not going to work to full-heartedly with the notion that you're going to complete it. So in other words, if I'm here, right, and I'm in this fight, but I'm kind of in it and out of it, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like overwhelmed by the situation. Unless I'm real lucky or they're real ineffective, I'm gonna get whooped, right? Instead, I'm gonna choose however I'm gonna work, right? Right? And I just have to work, and I have to take it, and I have to move in with a surety. Because if I come up and I'm like, I'm gonna get caught, right? And he controls my position, I'm not even gonna murder for my lord, right? It's just, I'm not gonna get it done. And if I don't get it done, yeah, it's bad for me, right? But it's bad for my family's honor. For real though, in a modern sense, in a modern paradigm, if you're applying this work with a pistol, with a knife, with your open-handed work like we're gonna show, and you hark it up and they drop you, if you're just by yourself, maybe, that's pretty bad, right? But what if you're there with your spouse or your children or other people, right? So this is a little fanatical, but you have an obligation to, when it is time to work, you go in, you work, you get it done, right? Otherwise, get out of the way. So, this ending the bizarre rant. We'll show some sword applications. So, and I'm going to have Eddie just feed me random attacks, whatever he wants, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to work in that method of Sassen. Straight, instant, now, right? So, we'll work, I'll drop it down, I'll make it more inviting for him, and I'll take it. Bam. So I cam it off to the side, bump, 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 bump. I drive into the throat, push him back, control the distance. Right? Again, come in, control the distance. Come off the line, so you're clear, have push control so that you can, protect yourself in that fashion. Drive in, get the work done, right? He comes, and again, come, catch, cam, ocular orbit, pop on through, bam. With this work, your goal, we'll talk about Fukuro Shinai in general here. When you start working with Fukuro Shinai, if you have it in your mind that this is a contest and you're trying to win, you're gonna have a really, really hard time because you will start doing what it takes to win. In other words, we're here, and you'll get those, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, right? And you'll start hitting. You'll start hitting your opponent, trying to attack him in a way that wins in the context of the training situation. But here's the thing, and this is a thing that a lot of people really just don't realize. Sparring is not an analog to actual combat, right? There's none of the stress, there is none of the risk, there is none of the fear, right? All sparring is a means for you to begin to pressure test your psychology and to a much lesser extent, your technical work. In other words, I'm having to deal with, I don't know what to do, I can choose, like in the kata, it's real simple. I am doing this one thing. You don't make choices, right? Even at a high level, the only choice you're making is your ma'ai, your distance and your relationship to the opponent, and that's it, right? There's no thought involved. The problem that a lot of people, most people, pretty much everyone I've ever trained with runs into when they go from kata to more free play is they get caught up in trying to make every decision. They're trying to micromanage the fight. And they're going, okay, I'm choosing this, I'm going to whack, right? And they just, your thinking is slow, right? You are not going to think faster than them just going, yup, and getting you, right? It's just not going to happen. So you have to learn what are the things that I can relegate to my body's intelligence, right? And obviously, the more you've trained, the more you've refined your body, the more you've shown it and let it adapt to the situations, this sort of situation, the more you can say, okay, body, you're taking care of that. And the less that you have to actually make a decision. The less you have to choose, the faster you are. And again, I am not talking about speed in terms of rapid gross body motion, right? Forcing my body to physically move faster. That is the lowest form of speed, and it really has almost no place in actual work. That's going to be controversial. However, there are two other types of speed that are much more important. One is distance traveled, right? In other words, I can swing really fast, but if the distance I travel is long, my attack is slow. Slower than if I move in a slow fashion in a direct line, right? Now, of course, I am generally not going to intentionally move slow, but the opposite is also true. I am not going to intentionally try to move fast. In other words, I am not going to say, body, push as hard as you can and get in there as quick as you can. It has a slew of biomechanical problems that go along with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to strike in harmony, right? I'm going to strike in good timing. That sounds sort of Yoda-ish, right? You can tell it's a good cut by the way it is, right? It doesn't seem very helpful. But the truth is, once you experience it, you'll understand it right away, right? Talking about it is not going to elucidate it, right? You got to get out there and swing a sword at a dude. So, with Fukuro Shinai and in sparring, your goal, first and foremost, is to move in the encounter using good tight sabaki, using good kihon, fundamental principles, right? In the beginning, this means that you're going to get hit a lot, a whole lot. But your options are this. You can either trust the hundreds of years that your school has been around and all of their combined experience, or you can assume that you're some sort of sword magic man that is just innately talented, some sword guru, unrefined, and that what you want to do is going to be better than what they're trying to teach you. In which point, why are you even studying if you're so good, right? Just go off and train on your own. So if we have to cede to the idea that what we're learning is there for a reason, and a reason that we cannot understand because we are still ignorant of the realities of sword fighting, because we don't fight with swords in real life in this era, right, by and large, then we have to commit to go, okay, this works, I'm not applying it well. And this leaves a real bad taste in people's mouth, because they don't want to have, they don't want to put their faith in things, because we're in a society where that's preyed upon. And there are indeed Koryu who will conduct themselves in that way, or martial arts that claim to be Koryu that will conduct themselves in a predatory fashion, but it's not your job to police that. It's your job to do your work, right? So, Fukuro Shinai, first part, right? You learn to work with good Kihon. Then you start studying, how do you feel, right? You bust out the kumbaya and the drum and circle, and you see, how does this dude trying to murder me make me feel? How does that feeling corrupt my intention, corrupt my form, right? How does it warp and twist me? Because it does, right? And until you understand how it affects you, you can't mitigate it, right? You can't control it at all. And you're just like, no, I'm perfectly, oh God, right? And now your work is poop, right? And you've lost. Once you can move with good Kihon, and of course this whole time you're trying to whack the dude just as much as he's trying to whack you, and trying not to be whacked. But after you do it with Kihon, and after you have a good sense of not only your feelings, but how to control their effect on your body. And to be clear, this is more about being aware of them and less about like, I'm macho, I can do this, I'm just gonna make myself do it, right? If your strategy relies on you fighting your body while you fight your enemy, you're gonna have a real rough time. You got to learn to live with your fear, to live with your desperation, to live with your self-pity a bit, right? Because if I'm working against Eddie and he starts whooping me, right? Shit, right? I'm gonna really start to feel sorry for myself. I'm like, here I am, I'm the super ninja guy with my super ninja sword, I got my fancy poofy pants, I'm the real deal. And this guy's beating me. It makes me feel bad, right? Poor me, right? And if I don't know how to resolve those feelings, right, and make my work effective, I'm gonna have a bad time. Especially when Bob the trucker picks a fight with me at the bar, hits me in the face, I'm like, but I'm a ninja, right? He's beating the tar out of me, I'm gonna feel real bad, my work's gonna break, I'm not gonna be effective, right? You have to learn how to deal with your own internal state and stop trying to think that I am an immovable, implacable stone Buddha, right? So, there's that. So when you're working with the Fukuro Shinai, your goal is not to win. Your goal is to improve your work, right? Winning is a consequence of having good work, and that's not comfortable, right? It's not an easy way to think about it, but, you know, I guarantee you it is the much faster, much more full and successful road of training. So, I guess one last example, he makes an attack, right? And again, I work. That time I was behind, we worked at the same time rather than Kendo-sen. So it wasn't a really great example, but you get the idea, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So, to make sure we don't screw up this cut, we're gonna pause it, and then we're gonna pick up with the next round of examples. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to continue our demonstrations of the concepts of Sassen, but applied through different mediums. So what we'll do is we'll do some open-handed work. Because most of us walk around with hands. It's an easy sort of bridge between the idea of we're murdering dudes with swords on some ancient Japanese battlefield to we're applying this work to modern day. So again, the concepts are just the same. Now, when you get to the point in your training that your teacher is all like, yes, okay, you understand this enough. I want you to show me your own examples of Sassen, right? A lot of people will do this kind of thing, right? They'll say, okay, this dude's gonna come and punch me, and there's a Sassen, right? And they'll like take this like mirror image Sassen position, and they're like, I have done Sassen. It's like, yes, but you've also completely missed the point, right? Sassen is not a shape that you put your body into that you throw at your opponent. That's not what Sassen is. Sassen is a collection of concepts that uses this shape thrown at your opponent as an example. So when you're applying your work, think outside the box. Try and, in the beginning, just so you can like, oh, I see, it's the same body position. That's great, right? But try to work in other ways. So if Eddie's here and he wants to throw something at me, I'm going to take that first hit, right? The moment he goes, I'm going to hit him, boom, I'm on him, right? And that is more Sassen, right? Of course, in your work, you want to remember that you're not fighting the Pillsbury Doughboy, right? You're fighting a human being, right? And human beings have parts. Parts that are meaningful to hit and parts that are not so meaningful to hit. So if Eddie turns to the camera towards, quick and easy, quick and dirty, parts that are kind of convenient to hit on a person if you're working with your open hand, right? For one, if you want to hit a person in the face, right, realize that you're going to increase the aggression, right? There's no fight in the world ended with, I punched her in the face. You know what? I feel a lot better about you, and I'm sorry I made that. No, you're going to agitate them. They're going to want to fight you more. Now, if that's part of your strategy, then that's fine, right? But for most people, wow, you're a real big dude, right? You don't want to piss them off more. So, well, why do you care about their feelings? Because you want to live, you want to win, right? And so maybe not turning them into somebody who is committed to your total destruction is a good thing. But again, it depends on your strategy. That being said, there is value in hitting to the face to manipulate and move your opponent around. Because when people fight, they get real tense, right? Right? And as this whole sort of trapezius locks up, as this turns, it will take the shoulders with it, right? And that's good for us because the shoulders are connected to the weapon. If this, right? It's like, no, get that punch away from me, right? I want that to go away, be gone, shoo, 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 right? Because I don't want to get hit because I like my pretty boy face, right? So you can hit him there. Obviously, we can hit him anywhere in the throat. It's convenient. It's soft between the arteries and the airways and just the general discomfort and fear associated with being hit in the throat. It's a powerful place. Really, I tend to prefer to hit the body because when you strike somebody in the face, they are invigorated. They come at you like a busty chicken, right? Right? When you start hitting them in the body, bump, whether you're hitting in the diaphragm or the liver or the kidneys on either side, you'll see a different reaction. They'll go from, right? They suck right in, and that fear, it gives them a little bit of a pause to think about their life choices that have brought them here. That being said, there is no one punch, magic, death touch that is 100% effective that's going to stop a fight every single time in every single situation. And if you believe that, I'm sure I've got a 24 DVD set to sell you, right? So you have to be prepared to work the guy and just keep working him into the ground, just like you do with your sword work. Say another example. Let's say he's grabbed onto me or something. He's like, and he's trying to pin this down so he can bash my face in or whatever. Bah! Right? Again, bah! I come in. The moment I see that hand come up to hit me, boom! I come in. I take the initiative, strike him in the liver, get him to start thinking about things. Now, in Hyoho, we have this concept, do nothing that is of no use, right? If your opponent is doing something to you that doesn't gain them anything, let them, right? Don't correct their mistakes. Just, yeah, go, you just tunnel off right over that cliff, Mr. Bad Guy, right? And in the same, you don't want to fart around with things that are not going to give you immediate benefit. So if he's grabbed me, right, oh, and he's trying to control me, he's pinning it down, he's thinking that, you know, of course I can come out of it, right? It's not a question of if, it's just, am I going to spend the time to do that? Do I need to, right? And there are times, of course, when I do need to. If I'm pinned, maybe cross-bodied, he's got me with the other hand, right? Now, he's very far away from me. I can't get to him easy. Stop stepping in front of the camera. Gotcha. You know, it's not easy for me to work on him here. So of course, right, it becomes important that I resolve that grab, right? But if he's on the same side, right, it's not a problem for me, right? I can still work directly and into the dude. So let your work be meaningful, or you're just wasting your time. And if you have time to waste, then they will, you know, take advantage of that because they want to win too, right? So I hope you can see from these examples, Sassen, right? That I'm going to come in and I'm going to work directly, efficiently. I'm going to take that kinness and initiative. I'm going to balance the forces. If he's driving at me, he's got this, right? Of course I'm going to be soft, right? And I'm going to make my work. Of course I'm going to move around him and accept it, right? In the same way as if he was being soft, right? He sort of, I'll drive right through his work and just work right now on him, right? This is such a shiny black shirt. And that it's the inside of Sassen that is important. The outside is useful, right? So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But you have to understand the concepts are what are important. The form is just a good example of that, right? So it is important also, but not nearly as big. Now, if we want to do work with the knives, it's the same kind of way, right? Same kind of thing, nothing special. And you should understand that in Koryu, if their work is open-handed, it is most definitely not, right? It is assumed that you are using a tanto. This is why you'll see a lot of these kind of hammer fist strikes, right? Because it's assumed that you have a tanto and you are driving it into this dude, right? Or a yawara or whatever little ninja weapon you want. So again, if he's, let's say I'm working in Gyakuteuchi, the sort of reverse grip, be sure and put your thumb on it unless you want to slide down on the blade, right? Let's say that he wants to work on me, right? And again, the moment he moves to work, I'm going to come in. I control the position so that I am in safe, right? But my work is in that thrust. Now, obviously, with bladed tools, your targets are slightly different. So we'll go ahead and go over them now. With the knife, because we are not generating the kind of natural cleaving force, the majority of large bones are just off the table. What we can work with are tendons, right? Radial artery, brachial artery, subclavian artery, usually in a sort of downward motion from either side. Just be sure and point your blade towards the front of their collarbone to cleave it. Obviously, again, the throat, whether you're going for the airway or whether you're going for the blood flow. Blood flow kills people fast, right? Airway, you take it if you can get it because it's distressing, right? Their air is their constitution, their endurance, their ability to keep going at you. You know, take it what you will. Now, even with the tanto, I've got enough blade length here to come up under the rib cage, under the diaphragm, into the low chamber of the heart. All right, very fast, pretty good. I am probably not going to start coming down here because my arm is at the radius of a circle, right? Here, I can touch him. Here, I'm a foot away, right? And so for me to get there, I have to come a foot closer to his steely rebuttal, right? And I want to avoid that if I can, right? Let's say that we're in just normal Teino-ichi, and he wants to come to attack, right? Again, I come right in. I drive, bam, koshimi hanmi. I've checked his hand to control it. If I want to start doing fancy stuff, I can start doing fancy stuff if that's in my skill toolbox, my repertoire. But it's not necessary, right? What's necessary is this idea that I own this fight, right? I have taken the wheel. I have taken control. Posture, control, work, power, right? Arms of the autumn monkey, the Chinese monkey, right? So the Chinese monkey is a short-armed monkey. The idea of this concept is that this is real dangerous and bad, don't do it, right? This is very powerful, gives you a lot of control, do it, right? And this is sword work, right? So I don't want to be here, where he can take me easy, where I'm off balance, where if he suppresses my sword, I will certainly lose it. I want to be here, right? Where even if my arms are extended, my form is control. He doesn't have as much room. Because if I'm at the furthest extent of my range, he leans back a little bit, and he voids my attack without voiding it in actual terms of timing. In other words, he's not taking an action to step back and an action to step back in, or half-half, right? One whole for the both. He's just, whoop, and working right away. It's fast. So we don't want to give him the option of taking the easy way out. We want to drive in, boop, and own it from the beginning. That's probably enough. I think you guys got it. Got it? Maybe. Okay, so now I'm going to have Eddie sit down, and we're going to talk about 2 other types of applications for Sassen, and then we'll wrap it up with our final thoughts. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the sort of indirect combat applications of this. First, we'll look at large-scale strategy. So let's say that my force is here, the enemy's force is here, right? We got like a little forest with some happy trees over here, and let's say that we've got maybe a meaningfully sized river over there. You can see that okay? Yeah, it's not quite. We're gonna move that in just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna squat a little bit to fit in the frame. So, for the sake of example, let's say that I have the slightly larger force and he has the slightly smaller force. It could be either way, it doesn't really matter. Now there are lots of ways for me to approach this situation, right? If I have the initiative over him, right? I've got my troops in motion and the situation is such that they have to come to me, then I might do something like cross this river, set up over here, wait till they cross it, and just as they're starting to cross it, start working them down. So they've got to work in the river. But that's not really, this doesn't really apply the concept of Sassen, which is to seize the initiative, to attack the enemy the moment he thinks to attack, and to drive and control the situation, to balance their force, so forth and so on. So what we're going to do instead is attack the enemy right before they attack. Now, there are cases, a lot of cases historically, where you just can't tell really if the enemies are massing, they're ready to do their thing. So what can we do? We can attack when it becomes logistically practical for them to attack. Now, what does that mean? It means that there are times when it is easy for people to fight, and there are times where it's hard for people to fight. Now, it's hard for people, especially in the ancient world, to fight at night. And so you don't really have a lot of that except in the cases of sieges, right? Why? Because we don't see in the dark. So we either need a full moon's light or we need fire. We need torches, right? Problem with torches are, I light up a line of torches and the enemy is going to see me coming from a mile away. They're going to prep and they're going to start working me. So what I'm going to do is, if it is practical to attack a person in sunlight, so I don't have to worry about torches, I don't have to have torch bearers, I don't have to have bonfires or any of that nonsense, then I'm going to attack them just before then. So in the hours preceding dawn, maybe 3 a.m.-ish, 3 to 4, you've gotten enough time for them to be lulled into complacency, for them to really start to drop their guard, because people are human, right? We all want to believe that we're like some hyper vigilant, 24 hours, I can have constant attention on something. I was like, I guarantee you can't have constant attention on something for 15 minutes because it's exhausting, right? It's physically fatiguing, which is why you work in groups. So I'm going to attack at that right before it becomes practical for them to attack. And I'll just drive my troops under cover of darkness right up into them. I will literally just move in and cleave the force. Bump, split it, and start working it. Now, let's say, because that's an example, obviously, of sort of archaic fighting. I've got cavalry, you've got cavalry. How are we going to handle this and balance it with our archers and everything like that? Let's say that this is a more modern example. And let's say that we've got some sandy boyos, and they're riding up in their little Toyota truck, and they're going to run into this cob sandstone building over here, and they're going to try and start setting up machine gun emplacements. The moment we see them move in there, we need to hit them now, right? Same way, direct line, drive it into them, control their space. Because if we let them have time to fortify their position, we're going to enter into a siege. And if we've got air support, no problem, calling the A-10s, right? But, if we're out on our little lonesome, we need to be able to hit them fast, to hit them hard, to hit them right now, and get the work done. Now, obviously, things like terrain, situation, what kind of support I have, what kind of support they have in the region is going to slightly, it could dramatically change how we're going to move into this. But fundamentally, this is a strategy of Sassen, to drive and to take. Right? Now, you can see that this is really simple. It's not as daunting as perhaps students of the Go Run No Show might think it is, right? And most of that dauntingness, that I don't understand what he means, large-scale strategy, just comes from an ignorance of large-scale strategy. So, if you want to really start to understand this stuff, it behooves you to study actual recorded accounts of large-scale strategy. So we can look at Waterloo, we can look at the Battle of Agincourt. In modern terms, we can look at when we rolled in during Desert Storm and took Baghdad. We can look at when we took Fallujah. There's lots and lots of historical examples from all over the world where we can go, okay, these two groups of people geared up, decided that they were to solve their problems through murder, and they ran at each other. How did they do it? What were the results? Was there success? Was there failure? What are we dealing with? And as you start to educate yourself and break it down into simple terms, right, it becomes clear that the idea of 10,000 to one side, 10,000 to another side coming together and fighting is fundamentally no different from one dude drawing down on another dude, right? It's same. So, where does this, oh, first off, why is that important? Why is it important to make that connection? Well, it's important because the master said so, right? Musashi said real clearly that if you take his sword fencing style as just that, as just a means of fighting with the sword, you're not going to understand it. It's not until you recognize the universality of his method that it becomes truly useful. I mean, yeah, you can, impress your friends and stuff, and maybe protect yourself, but that's such a small portion of the benefit of Hyoho when compared to its greater whole. So let's talk about that greater benefit, that greater whole. Where does Hyoho leave somebody who is a normal person, right? They're not an NCO out directing troops. They're not some ancient daimyo, or general leading his cavalry charge. It's not some super ninja sword guy. Maybe he's not even a person that is real into their personal defense. They don't carry a pistol, don't carry a knife, don't carry a OC spray or whatever. Does Hyoho have anything for him? Of course it does, right? Because we got everything, like Tupperware. Every time we talk to a person, we have that interpersonal reaction. And that interpersonal interaction, rather, is it's fundamentally the same as fighting. It is a contest. Now, just because it's a contest doesn't mean it is antagonistic. In other words, let's say you're trying to make plans with your significant other about what you want for dinner, right? And they lead the attack, right? They're uchidachi and they say, bam, what do you want for dinner? You could respond in kind, force against force. I don't know, what do you want for dinner? Right? And you can enter into this deadlock to see, well, who can be most obstinate about not wanting to know or trying to be accommodating but that's where you end up. You're in that deadlock. In contrast, if you go, Ushidachi attacks, right? What do you want for dinner? You can go, I would like this, right? And you come in right away, you drive in, you take control, and you direct the flow of combat, right? The flow of conversation. Now, of course, they might have a response. Oh, I don't want that. But at least you've gotten motion because immediately you're still in the active role. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Right? You drive the conversation. And of course, this is simplistic, right? We're bringing it down to a simple level because the context of your individual situation is, of course, going to shape your strategy. In the same way that I'm not just going to assume that every dude I fight, I'm just going to Sassen, right? And just take him. I'm going to look at him. I'm going to gauge his skill level. I'm going to gauge the situation. I'm going to look at my environment. I'm going to look at my state and see how that all sort of meshes up for me to be able to work efficiently. Same is true in conversation. Now, let's say that we're not in an amicable conversation like that, but maybe an antagonistic one, right? And I'm going to pick on easy targets here because that's the kind of guy I am. Let's say that some flat earth dude or lady comes up to you, oh, the earth is flat, blah, 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 I've got this to say about it, blah, 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 anyone who thinks otherwise is stupid, blah, 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 blah. Absolutely. You could go, well, here are these facts, and here's this evidence, and here's all this, blah, 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 blah. And you can try and fight them in the same way, directly confronting their effort. And just like in a real fight, it is mostly a battle of wills. Not, technique helps, right? Of course. Strategy helps a lot, of course. But fundamentally, the guy doesn't stop fighting until he breaks inside or you've mechanically broken him down. The former happening much faster than the latter, typically, until you get swords into play and then, right. Anyway, so this guy's all ba 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 ba. If I don't want to directly contest, what can I do? Well, I go, okay, sure, let's say that's true. If what you say is true, then what about these things? Right? You use their force, their inertia, use their size against them, right? but really, right? Acknowledge their points and say, yeah, that is absolutely true, that if you put a level on the ground, it is flat. And well, what about this? I take this basketball out and I put a level on that and it's flat. Well, it's different. It's different. It's not the same. Moon landings are fake, right? And now you're driving the conversation. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? Right? And rather than coming head on, you avoid their work and you drive in and take control of the conversation, right? Now, this might seem to our modern sensibilities to be very manipulative, because it's contrived, because it's artificial, because we're going, I'm not just responding with the truism that's in my heart. I'm manipulating and scheming a path, right? And it's a fair critique. But one does not preclude the other. In other words, just because you are taking a scheming path to get somewhere does not mean that the work that you apply is not in harmony with your internal truth, right? Your sense of self. We just have a bad taste in our cultural mouths for people that manipulate. But in truth, everybody manipulates. So it's just, are you a good witch or a bad witch kind of thing, really. That's about it. I think you guys have seen enough of the examples to really get a sense of not just how you can use the underlying principles of Sassen in physical confrontations or large-scale confrontation, but in just personal interactions, right? It's super simple. We just like with the large-scale combat, study it, right? Look at people. How do they behave? Open a book, right? Read what hundreds of people before you have written about the subject and, trust but verify. Look at their work and go, oh, yeah, I do. I see that. That'll work. I can do work based off this concept and have it be effective repeatably. I'll go with it, right? So that's that. Let's go ahead and give some closing thoughts to Sassen, and we'll wrap this puppy up. So that is the applications of Sassen. Both the direct applications of the waza and the underneath, the hidden. It's not really hidden, it's just, like you could give a cell phone to a caveman, and it's not that you've hidden the secrets of the cell phone from them, they just don't have enough information to make sense or to make valuable use of the tool. And that's the same way with Hyoho, right? With no secrets. So, yeah, this, if you get this kata, you got Hyoho, right? It is that simple. Which is real convenient if you're like a real person that has a real job and not, have 4 hours to train every day. Do you have any thoughts on Sassen?
We've covered it pretty good.
Okay. Even on training days where I only have a little bit of time, right? I'll get up, I'll do my dry fire practice with my pistol or my rifles or whatever, and then I'll do Sassen, right? And even if I only do just a couple slow, easy repetitions of Sassen, because of course, you want to step on the gas sometimes and really drive in so that your body is used to exerting a lot of force and a lot of motion all at once. But that is the benefit of going fast. It's not that you'll learn it better, right? So you have to also do it slow, steady, methodical. Take your time. Don't be in a rush, because that's where you're going to have more of an opportunity to observe the work that's happening, right? So that you can see it, so that you can understand it, so that you can say, oh, this is how we're relating, this is how we're interacting, this is my mai, this is our yin-yo, right? Our yin-yang. So going slow is important too. It's also how you make your waza good and fast and direct. That being said, again, there's virtue in, you know, driving that kata and really going quite speedily with it too. So do both, right? Yeah, that is about it. We will go ahead and next week's video will be the second kata, the how to do the haso, right? So we'll see you then. As always, you know, if you want to understand this work, you got to pick up a sword and go train.